I'm Ryan Campbell. I'm Development Director at RAPt, the Rehabilitation for Addicted Prisoners Trust. Development Director means in its broader sense service development, innovation, changing, developing, improving the way that we deliver addiction services to people who misuse substances and people in the criminal justice system who misuse substances. However, with the competitive times we're in at the minute, the majority of my job is probably around business development and contracting and tendering. It's got the potential to. I don't think it has yet. There's a lot of talk about PBR. I don't think we're actually seeing PBR yet. There's one pilot, which of course everyone knows around about in Peterborough, but nobody actually knows that much about it yet. It has the potential to change things because the principle is good. The principle of paying organisations where they deliver results. In my field, things like getting people off drugs, keeping people alive, reducing reoffending. If we can shift the money towards that side of things and get people off the hamster wheel that we've sometimes been on around process targets, number of assessments, how many people you can get into a room at one time, then that's a great thing. That's got real potential. But there are real risks to PBR as well, which we have to balance against that potential for good. One of those is that social good doesn't automatically mean economic good. It's difficult to put a price on it. We have difficulty quantifying the savings from things like reducing reoffending, let alone getting the money flowing from those savings into the services that reduce offending. So the pricing's quite artificial. It's a bit finger in the air, which means it doesn't work as a market as if you were just making something and selling it in a shop. So we've got to get our heads around that. There's a quite significant cost to PBR as well, which I don't think we've even worked it out yet. There's a cost of borrowing the capital to make it happen. There's a cost in terms of the risk to organisations and needing to deliver the outcomes, which will be recharged to the customer, the commissioner. There's a cost to the contracting mechanisms in place, and there's certainly a cost to evaluation, being able to work out whether those outcomes have been achieved. All of that cost isn't being spent on service delivery. So the savings and efficiency in service delivery have actually got to be quite considerable to be able to pay the additional costs of PBR. There's a risk that we move away from the principles and the potential of PBR to deliver simple outcomes such as reducing reoffending, getting people off drugs, because we have trouble measuring some of those things. There's a risk that we might have PBR applied to what we can measure, rather than trying to measure the outcomes that we really want to achieve. So we haven't really started to address how that's managed yet. And finally, I worry about the tendency in PBR to promote secretiveness. Under a sort of mainstream commissioning system, an organisation achieves results, and then the challenge is to get every organisation to be able to achieve those results. Under PBR, you're disincentivised to sharing how you do it. If you're able to deliver an outcome, then you guard that very secretively so only you can deliver it, which could be quite damaging towards a system if it isn't managed properly. Outcomes measures should be simple ones. In my field, it's getting people off drugs, keeping people safe and alive, reducing reoffending. If we go for more complex outcomes, then we start just getting mired into whole reams and reams and reams of performance monitoring. The point of PBR, as I understand it, is to deliver simple outcomes for society. So we should hold to that firmly, the simple ones. Reduce offending, reduce crime, get people off drugs, keep people safe, alive, healthy. Timing's a problem though, because those things aren't products. You don't make it like a Mars bar and then sell it in the newsagents. When you say keep people off drugs, are we talking about the old NDTMS government 13-week targets? There's a lot of talk about 6-month targets, there's a lot of talk about year targets. I would favour as long as possible, probably a year. Once you've got somebody off drugs or out of crime for about a year, then the prognosis for the future is good. So I would favour simple outcomes over quite a long time period, probably around a year. The question on incentives, though, is interesting, and particularly from my perspective from a voluntary organisation. Voluntary organisations aren't incentivised by making money, and neither are public sector organisations for that matter. If you ask a voluntary sector person why they come to work, if it's a paid salaried member of staff, then the salary, earning a living, is one of those incentives. We're not complete saints, but the other reason for coming to work is to achieve social goods, to make the world a better place. Payment just doesn't come into it. So the only way that voluntary organisations are really motivated by the idea of payment is in the context of survival, i.e. if you don't achieve these outcomes, then you won't be paid and you will go bankrupt. That's certainly incentivising, but it's a negative incentive, it's not a positive incentive. And we'd have to ask whether a negative incentive would deliver increased productivity and increased innovation. A scared, unhappy workforce you might expect to be a less productive and a less innovative workforce. So we have to look at that possible sort of perverse incentive, if you like, of negatively incentivising people who really aren't motivated, or organisations that really aren't motivated by the idea of payment. There aren't any yet, because we don't operate in any, not pure PBR schemes anyway. But there should be, if the system works, significant advantages. RAPt, to my knowledge, is the only provider of substance misuse treatment in prisons that can evidence, through PNC studies, Police National Computer Studies, whether people are offending once they've been released from prison. We can prove that we can do that. So if PBR is rewarding organisations that can demonstrate they can reduce crime, then we should do very well out of it. And the offenders we work with should do very well out of it. Certainly we're getting increased attention and interest because we're able to demonstrate that. As yet, that hasn't translated into PBR, because I don't think anyone's really worked out how to get that into a PBR mechanism. But we are working actively with a number of commissioners who are very interested in our payment being structured by the amount of offending that we managed to reduce, and we're very enthusiastic about that. At present, the disadvantages of PBR for RAPt, for my organisation, with the environment we're working in at the minute, there is no additional money. So nobody yet has come up to us and said, if you can get more people off drugs and reduce more crime, you will get more money. Rather, we're being told there is a pot of money, and if you can get people off drugs, reduce crime, then you will be able to get that pot of money. However, if you don't, you'll get less. So the only place you can go is getting less money rather than getting more money. So that's a worry at the minute. It requires us to think of new business models. The other, I don't know if it's a disadvantage, because we're getting a great deal out of it at the minute, but it's, in terms of its impact on the organisation, it's a lot of work. Working out systems that up until now we haven't understood. I certainly know a lot more about cohort definitions than I knew a year or so ago. I certainly know a lot more about social financing and investment models than I knew a year or so ago. That's a lot of work, but on the other hand, it's rewarding and interesting work which will hopefully pay dividends in the future. Over the next 3 to 5 years, probably no. Purely, well, two reasons. One is it's very complicated to set up, and I think it will take us that long to do it. But secondly, because we're operating in a time of severe financial constraint, which means there isn't going to be that extra reward there for new providers. We have to cut down on the amount of money that we're spending, and that is going to be a barrier to pure PBR. However, what I think we will have are PBR experiments, people trying it out, seeing how it'll work. And I think that will have impact across the whole of the system. I think it will start to demonstrate how you can effectively measure social outcomes and pay for those. And I think that will filter through the system, so others will have to aim for those same social outcomes. In other words, I suppose we'll get the framework, we'll answer a lot of the questions we don't know yet, so that maybe when times are a little bit easier, we can roll out PBR a lot more widely. But also we'll have the spirit of PBR filtering through to mainstream commissioning, so that real focus on meaningful, broad outcomes which are simple to understand and that people want.